Hello everybody, I'm here today with Carol and Davis. Welcome, Carol.
Hello.
Hello. Carol is a fantastic author of some very hard-hitting novels and true crime books. And we're here today to find out a little bit more about her and her books as well. Now, Carol, what type of books do you write?
Fairly dark books. I write crime novels, and they're very much why done it rather than who done it.
Yeah.
And unusually they don't have a serious detective.
Yeah.
There's occasional detective creeps in, but they're very much minor characters. It's much more about the psychopath, the serial rapist,
Right.
whatever type of criminal that I'm focusing on.
Sure.
And part of the book is always told from their perspective, because it's aberrant psychology that interests me.
That's absolutely wonderful. So it's all very psychological, and it's
Very
all
much
very
so.
sort of dark mind and
Yes,
things.
dark deeds.
Yeah, very hard hitting, as we said.
Yeah.
So now you've written in total, which is absolutely amazing, 7 novels.
Yes.
And 8 true crime books.
That's right.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about the novels that you've written?
Certainly. The first one was called Shrouded, and it was written from the perspective of a necrophile,
Right.
which is somebody that has sex with the dead.
Right. Okay.
I think just because that was such an odd thing, when I read about that, and it'd been the case of Dennis Nielsen,
Yes.
who some of your viewers will probably remember,
Yeah.
a London serial killer who had, I think it was over a dozen male victims.
Wow.
And it was one of the things that he was doing. He'd originally started persuading his partners to lie still for him, that he would pretend that they were dead, and then that wasn't enough for him. And so I wanted to understand this, because it's so different. Most of us want a breathing, talking partner,
absolutely.
somebody that responds to us physically.
Sure.
And so this was so odd to me, and then I started to research it, and I understood, and it's about having complete possession.
Yes.
And most of us don't need that. We can give our partners freedom and so on.
Yeah.
But someone who's very, very damaged feels hurt when their partner leaves, even if that partner only goes down the shops or something like
Right.
that. They see it as a rejection. They
Almost
want
like a
someone
loneliness,
there.
like
That's
a-
an overwhelming. One of the books about Dennis Nielsen was called Killing for Company.
Right.
Because his biographer found that was literally what he did. When the other man said he wanted to leave, at that stage Dennis Nielsen would strangle him from behind.
Unbelievable.
And would keep the corpse and would revisit it. So I looked at that type of
Yes.
behaviour.
Yes, absolutely.
In Shrouded, yeah.
I think the thing that interests a lot of people, and it is quite a macabre sort of interest, but it is something which does interest a lot of people, even whether or not they want to admit it or not.
Yeah.
So because of that factor, where do you get your information from?
A lot of it is just cases that have actually happened in real life. And then sometimes I've been fortunate enough to actually be able to speak to the detective on a case. Usually after they're retired,
Yes.
they can then talk to you at great length. And some of them, you know, this has been the case of their lives and they've managed to solve it. And they're understandably proud and they want to talk about it. And sometimes there have been certain aspects that they can't really talk about in the press, because at the end of the day it's a family newspaper.
Absolutely.
So they're limited in what they can say.
Of course.
You know, for example, the West, it was just what they did was just referred to as sexual torture.
Yes.
But you will sometimes find journalists that will tell you a bit more.
Yeah, a little bit more in depth.
A little bit more in depth.
Yeah.
Even if you don't use it all, because again, I protect my readers to a certain extent as well, but it gives you a further understanding of just what people are capable of.
Absolutely.
And that's very useful. So you had detectives, occasionally surviving victims.
Right.
For one of my books, Couples Who Kill.
Are they fairly open, Carol? Are they quite easy people to talk to, the sort of surviving victims, or do you find that you really have to do it little by little to get all the information out of them? Because I would imagine it's quite terrifying.
The victim that was most open was Caroline Roberts. She was the first surviving victim of Fred and Rose West.
Right, right.
And so I wrote Couples Who Kill, then obviously the West had to go in there. And she'd spoken at great length on television and to journalists before about her experiences. So I think it's like everything, it gets easier in the telling.
Yeah.
So she was very, very open, lovely woman. And again, you know, people say to me, oh, what you do is so dark, you must have nightmares and things like that. And I say, yeah, but I also meet people like the survivors. You know, Caroline Roberts has been a great mother. Her children were with her. I interviewed her in her home and her children came in and they all were giving her a cuddle and they loved her so much. And,
of course, I mean, what they could have lost.
What they could have lost, absolutely. And she was just so positive sort of thing. So there is an upside to...
Yes, I'm sure. I mean, a lot of people live their lives to walk out the front door in the morning and they expect to get on the bus, get in the car, go to work, come home, have dinner, go to bed.
Yeah.
So I suppose it's only when sometimes these things happen to people, it makes you realise how valuable life actually is.
I think it does. If something absolutely... I was widowed very suddenly 2.5 years ago at the age of 47, and obviously that was a phenomenal shock. But at the same time, once you go over that, it makes you realise that most people, that the sort of minutiae that upsets them, you know, the fact that their wheelie bin hasn't been collected, or there's a bit of litter outside, or the bus is 10 minutes late. You know,
queuing up for, you know, in the supermarket.
All sorts of things. And that all goes when something enormous happens to you, like bereavement, or people have survived a serious illness, something like that. You really get the bigger picture and you say none of these things matter. Really, all that matters is our relationships with other people.
Absolutely.
And I think helping them, I think that's being needed. I think that's the important thing in life.
That's exactly right. And I probably what you find as well with these surviving victims is the more they talk about it, the more it's less off them.
I think it is. I think it's cathartic for them. I think it definitely was cathartic to her to speak about it. Although in her case she had a lot of guilt. I mean, I think wrongly, that she'd played down. She didn't want to go to the police. She was a young girl. She'd been raped. She was humiliated. She went home. She went to bed. And her mother said to her, you know, you didn't come home all night. You're bruised. You know, we've got to go to the police. And she didn't say at the time she was raped. She was too ashamed.
You do find that, don't you? But a lot of victims find that they don't want to tell anybody else about it.
In those days, it wasn't special rape units, it was male policemen. They were all standing around staring at her. She was in her teens, you know, she came from quite a strict background, so she was expected to be... There was all sorts of things going on, and she didn't say, and the West got off on a lesser charge, and she felt guilty retrospectively, that, but, you know, she couldn't have saved the victims. There was no way.
You mentioned the West. I believe that that's one of your true crime books.
It's Couples Who Kill.
Couples Who Kill, and they're actually part of that.
Yeah, I do compendiums in each case. So Women Who Kill, Couples Who Kill, Children Who Kill.
Right.
As many interesting case studies as possible that fit in within a particular
Harold
theme.
Shipman, for example.
He's in Doctors Who Kill, obviously.
Doctors Who Kill as well. So what brought your interest? Or was it an interest that you had from an early age?
It was. I really very, very unhappy childhood, and I think if that's the case, you know, you can't write these sort of wish for a pony or read these wish for a pony type books. You know, you know what's out there, sort of thing. So certainly by the age of about 10, I was going to the adult section and reading the adult books. They stopped letting me take them out at the library. I kept getting sent back. So I would just stand there and read them, basically. And a friend's dad used to give me Harold Robbins books from the age of 12. So basically, I think that I had sort of adult reading tastes quite early. And the work that I wrote as a primary school was always dark. I mean, again, in those days it tended to be paranormal and things like that. And they called me the master storyteller, and I always had to read out my work every day, and everybody thought it was really scary and things like that. So obviously that interest continued into adulthood, and I started writing.
From an early age,
from a very early
10 years old.
Yes,
you know, it's. I mean, these days, a 10-year-old, you can sort of see that people would probably turn a blind eye more so because of films and TV and things like this, because it's a much closer world we live in now and a much more informative
it is.
world. But I suppose back then people sort of thought, oh, crikey, like, you know,
a bit
you're not taking any more
strange.
books home today, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I think I said on my website I was more like Stephen King's Carrie than she was.
Sure,
So
yeah.
very, very strange child, definitely.
well, the only thing, as far as I'm aware, is being normal is not being normal. So that's absolutely perfect. That's absolutely brilliant. Now, you mentioned about the West, and you mentioned about how the necrophilia and what have you, but how he got his Dennis Nielsen, how he got his victims to lie still and what have you. Now, you'll be able to tell me if I'm wrong or I'm right on this. I'm not sure. That somebody in a room will be able to spot somebody who will be able to manipulate a person out of a room of 40 people. Tell me a little bit more about that. How does that?
Yeah, that is true. I used to work for Women's Aid,
Yes.
which is abused women.
Yes.
And so we would read up, obviously, on how the abused man operates to try and counsel these women. And an abusive man can walk into a party of, say, 40 people, and he will be able to spot the one woman who will make his next victim. There'll be things about the way she carries herself, the eye contact, you know, body language.
Complete manipulation.
He will know, basically, I can do what I like to this one. And again, they start small, you know, and these men try to sort of bring you into their circle very, very early. I mean, some of these men will try and get engaged within 6 weeks. There's things like that. They know they cannot maintain this Mr. Nice guy.
No.
So they have to get hold of you quite quickly.
Yep.
And then they have to isolate you. So then they start saying things like, oh, if only your mother wasn't around, we could get on much better. And I've got a cousin that's got a caravan out at wherever, and we could live there. And then once you're geographically isolated,
yes,
they actually start to put you down.
the whole aura changes.
The whole thing changes, and it's, oh, you look fat in that dress, and then after a while you look fat in everything, or tooth in. I mean, it almost doesn't matter. They will find something, and they just start.
And the true colours start to see through.
And the woman thinks that she's worth less and less, and then she thinks, well, nobody else will want me, and then the violence starts, and she stays with it.
You know, Carol, the funny thing is, I mean, obviously the interview today is about the books and the novels and what have you, but I also think that a lot of our watchers are going to find it very interesting, especially women as well, who have been through this themselves. So that's very interesting. So thank you for your input on that one. Now, I've got to ask a question, obviously, Western Super Television.
Yeah.
Anybody murderous or anybody pretty nasty that's come to Western, or anybody that you know about?
I only found out recently, apparently the Bride in the Bath murderer found one of his victims in Weston-super-Mare.
Right.
Apparently he'd forged a relationship with her, and he was a con man at that stage, and he'd taken all her money, and then he left town. I don't know if they were in Weston at this stage. It might have been, but he definitely targeted women at seaside towns. Because I think when the sun's out and people are walking along the prom, there's a relaxed atmosphere, and you could sit next to a woman at a bench and start up a conversation.
Right.
And this was at a period after the war where there weren't enough men to go around. So women were more open, basically, to talk to a stranger.
Of course.
And again, like most con men, he was very well dressed, he was very well spoken. He was able to tap into what that person was looking for. So he'd stolen this poor woman's savings, gone away, and then I think a few years later, he was walking along Weston Prom and he saw her there. And he persuaded her there'd been some kind of awful mistake.
Right.
And she gave him a second chance, unfortunately.
Right.
And this time she married him.
Right.
And what he was doing was taking out insurance policies on each wife.
Yep.
And then he would take them to a seaside resort or whatever, honeymoon. And then he would wait till they were in the bath, and he would come in and he would grab their ankles and pull up. Now, if that happens, when you think about it, you're underwater,
slippery
and
bath.
you cannot get out.
No.
And he would drown them. And that was his modus operandi for, I mean, several wives. He got away with it because he moved around. It made it harder for them to track him down. But they did eventually. But yes, this poor woman in Weston, it's a bit off the seafront. You can see her house.
Sure.
And yeah, it was. It was quite interesting in court. They tried to recreate it because obviously he didn't say what he'd done.
Of course.
But they knew all these women drowned in the bath, and they were thinking, well, it's not easy to if you jump on somebody in the bath, there's going to be water, and there's probably going to be bruises, and there wasn't. There were no marks on these women, and so because of the ankles. So they figured out it's got to be that. And this nurse volunteered, so they brought a bath into court, and she went into the bath. And when the pathologist grabbed her ankles, pulled, and she passed out immediately. She went under the water. And so then they realised there's even a possibility that these women just fainted the second this happened. You're just immersed so suddenly in water, it's like the body goes into shock. And they actually had difficulty bringing her around. They were quite worried that they'd actually murdered her by mistake. He could have claimed another victim by proxy, sort of thing, which is
I can
quite
imagine
shocking.
Would have been very shocking. So I suppose the kind of moral to the story is, if there's any women out there who've just got married and unsure of their husbands,
lock the bathroom door.
Or have a shower for the first 2 years.
Have a shower, but we've always been psycho, haven't we? Just don't bathe.
Brilliant, just don't bother.
No,
That's
just
right,
don't
yeah. No, he'll probably walk off on his own anyway.
He will, he'll go off quickly.
And there was also rumours of Jack the Ripper, whether or not that's true or not,
That's
I don't
right.
know. Yeah, but he visited Weston at one point.
Yeah, somebody said that they, again, because we're not sure who he is, but one of the potential Jack the Rippers, of which there are many, had visited Weston at some point, and then I think went abroad after that. So.
Sure.
I'm sure he'd stay in Weston nowadays,
Yes, absolutely.
but you know, in those days the place was a bit more embryonic. And
maybe we kept him occupied with some of the things that we have in Weston, and he wouldn't have gone on to the murder or something.
Absolutely.
And now, obviously, writers, various different people have various different rituals. You'll probably be able to tell me more so what rituals they have, wearing the same suit, perhaps.
Yeah, I have heard. I remember there was one Canadian author, and in the end, her husband burned this tunic because she wore it every day when she was writing a novel. And I can't stand seeing it. I don't have any, I'm not superstitious. I think I'm like most writers. I put off starting to write anyway. So I mean, we can do things like clean the bathroom, which normally only happens once a year. To put off starting
we'll
the
stay
novel.
away from the bath for the time being.
Yeah, that's a good idea, isn't it? Yeah, water-free zone.
Water-free zone.
Yeah. So no, I mean, lots of displacement activity. But then when I do start, the only thing is I always have my PC facing a wall. I mean, I hear of writers who can work outside with laptops, things. I just could not do that. I hear writers that can work on trains. I've got to face a wall. That's my only thing. I think I'm an introvert anyway, and introverts are always trying to take down their level of stimulus. And so again, windows shut because I don't want to hear outside. You know, if there's a bird on the window ledge, I get my machine gun out.
Right.
Sort of thing.
Absolutely.
Silent and absolutely no distractions. And after a bit, you sort of fall into the screen, and you just get so involved with what you're writing.
Get into a zone.
You go into the zone. It's called flow, isn't it? I believe that's what psychologists say. That's what everybody looks for, flow. And you just feel completely right when that happens. It's probably a right brain, left brain thing.
Without a doubt.
Sort of. There's something psychological going on, and for some reason it's energy giving, because I can start to feel a bit tired and say I'll just do 15 minutes, and then next look up and an hour and a half has elapsed. So somehow it gives you energy, which is fantastic.
That's absolutely amazing. It's I mean, I write a bit of poetry, so I know kind of where you're coming from. It can take a little while to start, but once you're in that flow, it
just feels so right, doesn't it?
It feels so right.
Yeah, it's addictive.
Very much so. Now, you lived in Weston now for 8 years?
About 8 years, something like that, yes.
Okay. And originally from Dundee?
Dundee in Scotland, that's right, Okay.
And Edinburgh, you lived for a little while as well?
Many years. I did my first degree in Dundee, and I went to Edinburgh to do a postgraduate course, and my husband bought a house there at that stage, so we were in Edinburgh for many years. And then we just reached it got so busy, especially with the Fringe and the festival. And I remember towards the end, we would walk in Princess Street, and everybody was walking in rows along the pavement, and other people behind you. And I thought, it just takes one person to trip, and we would be like dominoes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It actually became physically unpleasant, and queuing in the supermarket sometimes, and the queues were so big they were handing out sweets in the summer so people didn't faint, and hot drinks, because it could be an hour and a half till you reach the start of the queue, and it was just, and we thought we don't want to do this anymore. So we originally moved to Salisbury, and we lived there for quite a few years. And my husband wanted to live by the sea, and so we started looking at seaside resorts, and Weston's very reasonably priced, and lots of space, and so we moved here, and I'm very happy.
Well, we're very thankful that you did.
Thank you.
Very much so. And just very quickly, I have a last bit. Tell us about the 7 novels you read, and the titles of the novels. So anybody out there that's watching can get their hands on one of the novels and just have a read, because I tell you what, they are fantastic books. Fantastic books, and it's very, very much worth a read. Tell us the titles. What's the...
well, I said Shrouded was the first one. The second one was Safe as Houses.
Okay.
And that's written from the perspective of a sadistic psychopath who has a safe house.
Yeah.
Third one, noise abatement, and that was based on my experience of having noisy neighbours in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
I didn't kill them off, but
No.
I wanted to.
Yeah.
I fantasised about it every
you
night.
kind of understand where they're coming from.
I absolutely understand. Yeah, I've had some sympathy with people who have actually done that. You have to live through it to know how bad it is. The relentlessness of no sleep.
No sleep deprivation
That's
is
right.
just the worst.
It changes you. It does. Gosh, what was the fourth one? I think it might have been Kiss It Away, and it's from the viewpoint of a rapist. It's set in Salisbury.
Yep.
Sob Story, which is a naive female who befriends a prisoner as a pen pal, unaware that he's killed before and that he's about to get out. So again, it's a sort of
quite scary.
It's quite scary. Yeah. There's a naivety about a lot of these women, you know, and they think that
they can change them. They can.
Well, no, what they actually think is that it's the ideal relationship because he's locked up. What you find is they don't actually want a real world relationship.
No.
They've often failed a lot of real world relationships.
Sure.
They can write the poetry and send the little gifts. Quite often when he says he's getting out, the relationship ends at that stage. But in the case of Sob Story, he doesn't tell her in advance he's getting out. He just shows up on the doorstep.
Don't give too much away now.
No, I'm not giving too absolutely. And the latest one's Extinction.
Yes.
It's just out in hardback, but it'll be out in paperback in November this year. And it's partly set in a bereavement counselling clinic, again, because I use everything that I know. And although I didn't have formal counselling, I did go to some of the drop-in sessions that the bereavement agency offers. And I was aware of that. Oh, you know, this is where a man or woman are at their most vulnerable.
Sure.
If a sociopath wanted to prey on people, this is where he would be. So again, just everything, just using life experience, but then adding some, because that's what you do, basically.
That's what you do. As a writer.
Just go for the dramatic.
Completely. And do you have a website, Carol?
I do. It's carolandavis.co.uk.
Yeah. And obviously, I'm sure everybody out there will say, have you seen any dead bodies at all?
Yes, I have. I've been to the mortuary.
Right, okay.
And they don't look quite like they look on CSI. You can see that they haven't got the colour quite right,
Makeup.
sort of thing. Yes.
Brilliant. That's absolutely wonderful. Well, Carol, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today.
I've enjoyed it.
Me too. And thank you so much for coming in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.